Hi, it's Margaret, and thank you so much for joining me here on The Gardening Me. Today I'm going to do a little bit of winter sowing. Now, if you saw my winter sowing video from last year, you'll know that several years ago, I did try winter sowing. I didn't have really much success with it. And then at one point in time, I decided to switch things up a little bit. And then all of a sudden, I did have success and it was awesome. So now the main problem I have is showing restraint. It is so easy to go overboard and sow way too much stuff. And I'm not going to guarantee that I won't do that again this year, but I'm going to try. Anyhow, today what I'll be doing is sowing 4 different perennials, and one of them I've grown from seed before. One I've never grown, period. Like I've never even had it in my garden. And the other 2 I do have in my garden. I purchased those as plants though, so I didn't grow them from seed. So this is super exciting. I am planning on growing quite a bit using winter sowing this year, and I'm just kind of getting started now. A little bit late. I probably should have done this a few weeks ago, but that's okay. We still have plenty of time here where I am in Southern Ontario. So let's get sowing. Before I get to the seeds, let's get the soil ready first. Now, for this batch of seed, I've decided to use potting soil instead of the seed starting mix that I normally use. And I have here the Pro Mix, just general purpose potting soil. I'm going to moisten it up just so it's damp, holds together, but I don't want it sopping wet. I don't want to pick up a handful of it and have water pouring out of it. If I see any little sticks and stuff like this, I just take them out. Usually Pro Mix is not very bad at all. There may be a few little things in here, but it's perfectly fine otherwise. So initially it will take quite a bit of water. I actually just opened up a new bag of this. So it is quite dry. Now, I've tried using potting mix in the past unsuccessfully, but that was before I sort of nailed down my method of winter sowing. And I'm not necessarily sure that the potting mix itself is what caused my issues. I'm thinking it was the method. And many successful winter sowers use potting soil instead of seed starting mix. And in a way, it really does make total sense because potting soil is heavier, it stays moister longer, and there's less chance that the pots will dry out, especially when the spring temperatures start to rise. But it's also light enough that it drains well, which is really important. And in addition, most potting soil does contain nutrients in it, some sort of nutrients, and seed starting mix normally does not. And this could give those little seedlings an added boost when they start growing. So it is pretty moist. I probably could use just a tiny bit more. There we go. Now, most of the perennials that I'm growing will take 30 days or longer. Some even say they take up to 60 or even 90 days to germinate once the temperatures start to rise in the spring. So because of that, what I've decided to also do is use these larger pots. Now, these are 3.5-inch pots, so they're 3.5-inch all the way around, but they're very deep. They're about 5 inches deep. And that extra volume of soil, it should really contribute to better moisture retention, and it also means less babysitting, especially when the temperatures start to go up in the spring. So that's what I'll be using for this round of winter sowing. Now, I'm only going to be using 1 pot per variety, but I'll be sowing a bunch of seeds in each pot, and then when they are large enough to transplant, I will just tease them apart and transplant them individually at that point in time. So let's get all the pots filled up with soil. Now, when you fill them up, you do want to gently press them down. You don't want to really compact the soil or anything. The other thing that you want to do is just make sure that it's even in terms of the soil surface, that you don't have any little holes, I guess, or little crevices that the seeds can fall into, because a lot of these seeds need light to germinate. And if you don't make a nice, smooth, even surface, then what'll happen is the seeds may end up falling into those crevices and they won't get the light that they need to germinate. So I learned that one the hard way. Okay, so I washed my hands because I don't want to be handling those seeds. Some of them are probably going to look like dust with wet hands, or hands that are dirty, full of soil. And I also created the labels, which is something I'll do first before I get sowing. And same reason, don't want to get my hands dirty and then be creating the labels. And also, when I create the labels, I'll have obviously the plant variety name on the front, and I will also on the back indicate how tall it is, as well as how far apart to plant them, if I can find that information. Sometimes it doesn't say how far apart you plant them, so you kind of have to guess. But anyhow, and this just makes it so much easier when eventually you go to plant it outside and you have the information right there instead of having to go look everything up at that point in time. So let's just quickly go through the seeds that I'm sowing. Now, the seed packets are all the same. So I did have to go searching for photos of each of these plants so that I can show you what they looked like. And I will put them up as I'm sowing each one. And I'll also tell you a little bit more about them when I'm doing that as well. But quickly, so first I have this guy, Globe Thistle, and it's an Echinops, platinum blue. Then I have Lady's Mantle, but this one is not the typical Lady's Mantle that you grow, which is Alchemilla mollis. This is Alchemilla epipsila. Anyhow, it's a more compact variety of Alchemilla or Lady's Mantle. And then we have a Veronica. This one doesn't have a variety name. It's just a species, Veronica longifolia. And then we have a Geum, and this one is Koi, it's called. So those are the ones that I'll be sowing, and I think I will start with the Geum. So this variety of Geum is a bit more compact than most other Geums. It only gets to be about 10 inches tall, and it has bright red flowers that bloom from around May to August. It's a part shade to full sun plant, and it's hardy from zones 4 to 10. For this one, the instructions actually say to sow it just below the soil surface. So I have my containers here. Let me actually move these other guys out of the way. Get my label so I don't forget to put it in the pot, because sometimes I do that. Now, let's see what these seeds look like. Okay, so there's a little wax paper envelope in here. Oh, these are not too bad. They're not tiny, tiny, tiny. I don't know how many seeds I have in here. Doesn't look like a lot. I'm going to sow all of them. So maybe 10 or so. So this is what the seed looks like for the Geum. As I said, it's supposed to be just below the soil surface. So I am going to place these seeds, spread them apart on the soil surface. So I'm going to count them as I do that, because I like to know how many seeds I sowed, just for future reference, because then I'll know if I have a good germination rate or not. If I don't know how many seeds I sowed, like if I sowed 10 seeds and I get 5 germinating, then I'm not sure, did I only sow 5 seeds and they all germinated, or did I sow 30 seeds and only 5 germinated, that kind of thing. So there's 11 seeds in here. I did space them out, maybe half an inch or so apart, because I want to make sure that when I go to transplant these, they're not really stuck close together, and then they'll, be damaged more likely than not when I try to pull them apart. So I do try to put a little bit of space in between. Now I'm spraying them with water first so that they have that good seed to soil contact, and the seeds are really nicely moist. I'm going to spray them again, but I like just kind of doing that first. Now what I have here is some dry soil, because if I want just a very thin layer of soil, the stuff that I moistened is kind of clumpy. So if I try to spread that around, it'll be in kind of big clumps, whereas this stuff I can just spread around much more finely. Like that. And I think that's good. Okay, so I don't see any of the seeds. This is, like I said, just a very fine layer of soil. And I am going to spray that again really well. And then what I'm going to do is I am actually going to put this pot in a tray of water while I'm doing the rest here, and I am just going to let that water soak up and thoroughly saturate the soil. I don't want to pour on top because that will disturb the seeds that I just planted. The next variety I'm sowing are the Echinops, and this is platinum blue globe thistle. Now, this one is a beautiful, vibrant blue bloom, and they stand on top of white woolly stems. They also attract butterflies, they're drought tolerant, and they grow well in poor soils. And this particular variety forms tidy clumps and is not invasive. It gets 24 inches tall and is best in full sun, but it does tolerate a little bit of shade, and it's winter hardy from zones 3 to 8. So let's take a look to see what these look like. So for these, they are surface sown. So I am just going to spread out these 10 seeds on the top of the soil. Whoops. Did I drop one? Oh, here it is. Okay, there we go. And give them a spray of water. And I am also going to top this, because it is sown right on the surface of the soil, with a little bit of coarse vermiculite. And what this is going to do is allow the light still to get to the seed, because these do need light to germinate, but it will keep that top layer of soil moisture. So I give this a very good spray. And look for which one it is. Oh, here it is. And put this one here. And this one is ready to go into my tray with water. Now the next one I am sowing is the Alchemilla epipsila. Epipsila, the lady's mantle. Now, as I mentioned, this is a more compact variety than the standard Alchemilla or lady's mantle that you see, the Alchemilla mollis. It gets to only about 12 inches tall and 12 inches wide, versus the Alchemilla mollis, which gets 18 inches tall and around 24 inches wide. Now, I do grow lady's mantle primarily for the foliage, but it does have pretty poofs of yellow-green flowers during the summer. It grows in shade to part shade, and it prefers average to moist soil that's pretty much well drained, and it grows from zones 3 to 8. I've also read that this particular species is slightly better behaved than the traditional one that you grow, that it doesn't self-seed as freely. This could be an issue though, because it could also mean that it's trickier to grow from seed. And the instructions are definitely a little bit different after we sow the seeds, but I'll get to that in just a minute. So these guys are surface sown in the exact same way as I just did the Echinops. And oh, these are teeny tiny. Okay. gonna have to use some scissors here to open this guy. Okay. Okay, so here are the seeds. So for this one, I was thinking I might use the toothpick method, but you know what? I think they are large enough where I may be able to put them down. This is where it really does matter about that tamping down on the soil, because they're so small. They can really get underneath the soil. Okay, you know what? I think I'm good. I'm not going to need to do the toothpick method for this. Okay, that was about 22 seeds. So now, once again, whoops, I am going to spray these. And then do the coarse vermiculite on top, because they do need that light for germination. That's good. Hopefully that wasn't actually too heavy a layer. The seeds are so tiny. And there we go. Okay, so this is where there's a little bit of a difference between the traditional sowing method, where you just sow the seeds and plonk everything outside, and the instructions here on the seed packet. And what they say, let me just put my glasses on for this, is that you have to leave the container at room temperature for 5 weeks. And then you have to cold stratify for 80 days. And then you place it back in room temperature. And I'm assuming that's when the germination will occur, after the 80 days of stratification. Now, had I realized that this was the sowing method for this particular type of plant, then I would have started this back in December and sowed them indoors and then plopped them outside into a winter sowing container now. So what I'm going to do for this is something that's a little bit different. What I'm going to do is I am going to sow the seeds, and I am going to leave them at room temperature for the 30 days. But after that, what I'll do is I will be putting it into the refrigerator. After they're in the refrigerator for that 80-day stratification period, it'll probably be around the beginning of June at that point. Then I will put them outside and hopefully they germinate. And this is the last one that I am doing. And this is a Veronica longifolia. It does not have a variety name. Oh, these are glued down like really well. And whoa, tiny, tiny. Now, Veronica longifolia is a clump-forming variety with beautiful spikes of lilac blue flowers from late spring to early summer. And it does sporadically rebloom all the way up until September. Now, from the name, you can guess what makes this one particularly unique is the long leaves, which grow up to 3 inches long. It needs full sun and is hardy from zones 4 to 10. Now, I'm supposed to have 20 seeds in here. These are ridiculously tiny. So I am going to put these in my little sower that I have. And this one actually does not indicate it needs any type of stratification. So what I'm going to do is, there should be 20 seeds. I'm going to sow half of them now, so 10 seeds now, and do the winter sowing thing with them. The other half I am going to sow in a few weeks, around maybe mid-March or so, and we'll have to compare to see how the winter sown ones do as compared to the indoor sown ones. So here's my little thing that I use. Oh, you can barely see these guys. I think I have 9 there already. So if I can get one more. Oh, I think I got at least one more. Okay, good enough. Okay, so these are way too small for me to hand sew, so I will be doing the toothpick method. And the reason I'm doing that instead of just sprinkling them on is in order to get that good spacing between each of the seedlings. And now I use a skewer here. You can also use a toothpick. And the toothpick method, as I'm sure many of you know, is where you moisten the tip of the skewer or toothpick and you just touch it to the seed. It should pick up the seed and then you can just place it on the soil. So I am going to do that with all 10 of these seeds. It should pop right off the skewer when you touch it on the soil. And if it doesn't, I kind of give it a little bit of a twist and then it comes right off. Make sure if you get a little bit of soil on the skewer while you're doing this to just brush it off. I mean, these are so tiny that it's hard to tell if what I have on the skewer is soil or seed. One more. I'm going to put it right here. Okay, and let me get the thing here. And that's one of the reasons why I love using this little contraption as well, is it's very easy to get all of those tiny, tiny seeds back into the container. Okay, so this is that. Put it back into my mangled envelope. There we go. And just like before, we're going to give this a spray. We are going to add the coarse vermiculite, and this time for sure I have to be very sparse with it. In fact, I'm going to use my fingers, I think, for some of it here. Okay, I think that's it. And I am going to spray again. Actually, I think I might have just a tiny bit more. There's a couple of areas here that are a little too sparse. There we go. Okay. And that is it. So there you go, Veronica longifolia, finished. So now I am going to place this along with the others, and I usually let them sit here for about 20 minutes or so to really, soak up as much moisture as they can. And then I'll be putting them into the winter sowing bin, with the exception of the ladies' mantle. I am going to put a covering on this, like a little baggie or something like that, to keep everything moist in here. Keep it a little bit open so it does still get a tiny bit of air circulation, not under the grow lights, at room temperature for 5 weeks. And then at that point, it will be going in the fridge for the 80 days of stratification. And that's it. I will make sure to keep you up to date on how these guys do. Thank you so much for joining me today, and we'll see you next time. Bye.